On the morning of September 12, 2023, Birmingham, Alabama, woke up with the usual serenity of a city that seemed immune to great tragedies. The weather was mild, a peaceful reflection of early autumn. In the busy streets and charming cafe squares, life continued its normal course. However, an event about to happen that day was about to change this normality forever. Emily Carter, a 34-year-old history teacher, was known in her community not only for her dedication to teaching but also for the kindness with which she treated her students. Central High School, where Emily taught, was a place where she not only educated, but also offered a listening ear and emotional support to those who needed it. Emily was a respected and beloved figure, known for her patience and her ability to connect with her students. Ryan Mitchell, 17, was one of the most troubled students at school. He had been facing a series of personal difficulties, family problems, academic problems, and poor mental health. Recently, Ryan had approached Emily, seeking help and guidance. His parents were in a difficult financial situation, and he was struggling to deal with the pressure. The week before, Emily had scheduled a meeting with Ryan to discuss his academic progress and offer additional support. She realized there was something more behind Ryan's problems and felt he needed more than just academic help. She committed to listening and, if necessary, referring him for psychological support. With that in mind, Emily accepted Ryan's proposal to meet at a local coffee shop, an informal setting that he suggested as a place where he would feel more comfortable. The Café du Barreau coffee shop, located a few blocks from the school, was a cozy and popular place among locals. Emily arrived at the cafe around 2 p.m., an hour before the scheduled meeting. She sat at a table near the window, giving her a clear view of the entrance. She chose an espresso and began reviewing her notes for the meeting. Ryan arrived exactly at the agreed time. His closed and nervous expression revealed the anxiety he felt. He was dressed in a gray sweater and dark jeans, his hands shaking slightly as he held a cup of coffee. He approached Emily's table and, after a brief smile of greeting, sat down opposite her. The conversation started calmly. Emily asked questions about how Ryan was feeling and his recent challenges. Ryan began to talk about the difficulties he was facing, but the conversation quickly took a more personal and dark turn. He revealed that he was feeling increasingly desperate and that his emotions were out of control. He talked about a growing sense of hopelessness and fear, and how he felt like no one really understood him. Emily listened intently, trying to provide support and advice. However, as the conversation progressed, Ryan began to show signs of frustration and irritation. His words became more blunt, and he began to express a sense of betrayal and despair. Emily, concerned about Ryan's growing emotional outburst, tried to calm him down and suggested he seek professional help, offering to help him do so. It was then that, in a moment of frustration, Ryan exploded. In a fit of rage, he accused Emily of not truly understanding his pain and of just trying to get rid of him. The conversation turned into a heated argument, with Ryan raising his voice and Emily trying in vain to keep the situation under control. The cafeteria environment, which was once welcoming and safe, quickly became a scene of tension and despair. In the midst of the argument, Ryan, overcome by a wave of despair and anger, acted impulsively. He grabbed a heavy object from the nearby table and, in a moment of irrational violence, attacked Emily. The scene was quick and brutal. Emily, surprised and defenseless, had no chance to react. Ryan, in a frenzy, attacked her violently until she ceased moving. After the attack, Ryan hurriedly left the coffee shop, leaving an injured and unconscious Emily on the floor. He fled to his home, his emotional state now mixed with a sense of guilt and panic. Witnesses in the coffee shop were horrified, and when police arrived at the scene, they found Emily seriously injured. She was immediately taken to hospital, but unfortunately, she was pronounced dead shortly after arriving. What seemed like a meeting of support and help turned into a tragic and brutal episode, leaving the community in shock. News of Emily Carter's murder began to spread, and the city of Birmingham was gripped by a sense of disbelief and sadness. The investigation began immediately, and the focus turned to understanding how a situation that began with the best of intentions could have ended so horribly. I hope this chapter development meets your needs for the documentary. If you need anything else, just let us know. Following the violent coffee shop encounter on September 12, 2023, the city of Birmingham was in a state of shock. The death of teacher Emily Carter, an admired and respected figure, left the community in mourning and the school in a crisis of insecurity. However, the worst was yet to come, as the true extent of the tragedy began to unfold. Emily didn't show up for work the next morning, September 13th. Her absence was immediately noticed by colleagues and students who were concerned about the teacher's well-being. As was common, Emily always gave advance notice if she was unable to attend class, and her absence without any prior notice raised alarms among school staff. The next day, September 14th, passed without any news from Emily. Her colleagues tried to contact her by phone, but all attempts were unsuccessful. Alarmed, they decided to contact the authorities to report the disappearance. The police were called and began investigating the case. Investigators began by reviewing Emily's latest activity. Security cameras from the coffee shop where she had met with Ryan Mitchell clearly showed the teacher entering the premises. The recording showed Emily sitting at a table, with Ryan arriving shortly after. The atmosphere seemed calm at first, but it soon became apparent that something had gotten out of control as Ryan left the room in a hurry. On the morning of September 15th, officers searched Emily's apartment but found no clues that could indicate her whereabouts. The only thing found was a work bag with documents and a diary with notes. In his diary, there was a note about the meeting with Ryan, but nothing to indicate any kind of imminent conflict. Meanwhile, the police began questioning people close to Emily and Ryan. Co-workers, friends, and family were questioned, but none of them had concrete information about the teacher's disappearance. The prolonged absence and lack of communication began to generate a growing sense of urgency. The case gained significant attention from local media, who began reporting on Emily's disappearance. The community was eager for news and concerned about the well-being of one of its most beloved residents. Flyers with information about Emily and a request for information were distributed throughout the city. The investigation delved into the life of Ryan Mitchell, the last known person to have seen Emily. Ryan was called in for further questioning, and his answers became increasingly evasive. He continued to maintain that he did not know what had happened to the teacher, but his behavior was raising additional suspicions. The fact that Ryan was seen leaving the coffee shop in an agitated state and his resistance to cooperating with the investigation heightened the officers' concerns. Ryan's situation has become an intense focus for police. Pressure was mounting, and the community was growing impatient with the lack of answers. The investigation into Emily Carter's disappearance was becoming a high-profile case, and the city was in a state of increasing apprehension. With each day that passed without a solution, fear and uncertainty took hold in Birmingham even more. What began as an attempt to help a struggling student had turned into a desperate search for answers. The mystery surrounding Emily's disappearance was about to intensify, and the truth about what really happened that fateful afternoon would begin to reveal itself. After a week of relentless searches and intensive investigations, the Birmingham community was in a state of increasing despair. The city, which was once calm and peaceful, was now marked by anguish and uncertainty. Emily Carter's disappearance had become the focus of local news and attracted the attention of authorities and concerned citizens. On September 22, 2023, a crucial twist in the case began to unfold. An anonymous call, later revealed to be from a concerned local resident, led police to an isolated area of woodland around 20 kilometers from the center of Birmingham. The report mentioned possible suspicious activity and a strange smell coming from the area. The police search team, accompanied by sniffer dogs and forensic experts, headed to the indicated area. The forest, a dense and uncrowded area, was covered in a blanket of dry leaves and thick vegetation. The terrain was rugged and challenging, but the team was determined to follow any clue that might lead to Emily's whereabouts. As they progressed along the trail, investigators began to notice signs of a possible disturbance in the ground. They found areas where soil had recently been moved, and vegetation was visibly dented. The team continued to excavate and investigate these areas, following a growing feeling that they were close to something important. Around 11 a.m., officers arrived at a small clearing in the woods. There, they found something that immediately made investigators' hearts race: a shallow hole covered in leaves and branches. When they began to remove the covering, what was hidden there revealed itself in a shocking way. Emily Carter's body was partially buried, visibly in an advanced state of decomposition. Officers immediately called forensics and medical staff to deal with the crime scene. The area was cordoned off, and the forensic team began work on carefully removing the body. The process was painstaking and time-consuming, as any additional evidence that could be found around the area was also of great importance to the investigation. Emily's body was taken to the medical examiner's office, where an autopsy confirmed that she had been the victim of homicide. Examinations revealed clear signs of physical aggression, including multiple traumas and asphyxiation. Confirmation of the cause of death brought a new wave of sadness and outrage to the community. Meanwhile, the discovery of the body intensified the search for answers about what led to this tragic event. The investigation team focused on analyzing all evidence collected at the crime scene, including any clues that could provide a clearer picture of what had occurred before and after Emily's death. The discovery of the body marked a turning point in the case, moving from a desperate search for a missing person to an ongoing murder investigation. Police intensified their efforts to gather witnesses and obtain any additional information that could lead to the capture of the person responsible. Emily Carter's case was becoming increasingly complex, and the community was eager for justice and answers. As news of the discovery of the body spread, the mood in Birmingham became even more somber. The loss of Emily and the brutality of the crime left the city in a state of deep mourning. The search for truth was far from over, and what followed would be a tireless quest to understand the events that led to this unspeakable tragedy. Following the discovery of Emily Carter's body and confirmation that she had been murdered, the pressure on the Birmingham police increased considerably. The city was in a state of unrest and outrage, and the community was crying out for justice. Investigators were under intense pressure to solve the case, and all eyes were on Ryan Mitchell, the last person known to have been with Emily. Ryan, who until then had been evasive and reticent during interrogations, was called again to give evidence. The atmosphere in the interrogation room was tense. The detectives, determined to uncover the truth, were ready to ask direct, hard-hitting questions. They believed Ryan knew more than he had revealed and were willing to pressure him until he felt compelled to speak. Ryan entered the room with an expression of nervousness and guilt. His posture was defensive, and he avoided eye contact. The detectives began questioning him, repeating questions about his encounter with Emily and what had really happened at the coffee shop. As the conversation progressed, Ryan began to become increasingly restless, swinging his legs and looking down. Investigators, noticing his behavior, intensified their focus on the timeline and emotions he had previously expressed. They asked him about his feelings towards Emily and how he had reacted during the argument. In a moment of frustration and desperation, Ryan finally gave in to the pressure. With a trembling voice, he began to tell his version of events, but not without hesitation. "I didn't want things to come to this," Ryan said, his voice cracking. "I just wanted help. I felt so lost, so alone. And when she told me to get help, I couldn't handle it." The tension in the room increased as Ryan began to describe the argument they had in the cafeteria. He recounted his feelings of despair and frustration, as if he were being pushed into a corner. Ryan admitted that the conversation quickly turned into a cry of despair, but his words were confusing, mixing anger and sadness. "I didn't kill her. I didn't want that to happen," he shouted, the panic in his voice becoming more and more evident. "I just lost control. It all happened so fast." Detectives continued to press him. They wanted to know how he had felt after the attack and where he had been since. Ryan, now clearly in a state of shock, began to cry. He admitted that he had left the coffee shop in a state of panic, not knowing what to do or where to go. His mind was filled with confusion, and what started as a moment of anger had turned into a nightmare. "I just wanted her to understand me, for someone to understand me," he whispered, his voice now barely audible. "I didn't want her to die. I thought if I hurt her, she might hear me. I don't know what I was thinking." It was at that moment, enveloped in emotional turmoil, that Ryan confessed. He revealed that, after the attack, he had been so scared that he didn't know how to turn back. He had buried Emily's body in the woods, trying to erase what he had done. His confession, although tragic, brought a wave of relief to investigators, who now had a clear direction to follow in the case. Police, armed with Ryan's confession, worked quickly to collect the necessary evidence. With the truth revealed, Emily Carter's case began to unfold toward an inevitable outcome. The city of Birmingham, still in shock, now awaited the justice they hoped would be served. Ryan Mitchell's confession not only shed light on the events that led to Emily's death, but also revealed the complexity of a young mind battling inner demons. What should have been a simple meeting of support turned into a tragedy that would shake the city and its citizens forever. With Ryan Mitchell's confession and the confirmation of Emily Carter's murder, Birmingham was finally beginning to recover from the shock that rocked the city. The brutality of the crime left a deep mark on the community, and the court case was poised to bring closure to the case that dominated the headlines and hearts of local citizens. In the days after the confession, the city was faced with a wave of conflicting emotions. The news of the murder and the fact that a young student had been responsible generated a whirlwind of feelings. While many were relieved to finally get answers, others were consumed with sadness and outrage. The loss of Emily Carter, a dedicated and beloved teacher, was still a pain difficult to bear for those who knew her. Ryan Mitchell's trial began in late September 2023, and the courtroom was packed with journalists, family, and community members. Media coverage was extensive, reflecting public interest and the need to see justice done. Ryan, now with a defense attorney, was facing first-degree murder charges, and the prosecution was determined to secure a harsh sentence. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a clear timeline of events based on Ryan's confession and evidence collected at the crime scene. The detailed description of the attack and the attempt to hide the body left the jurors and the public deeply impacted. Ryan's defense attempted to argue that he had acted under great emotional and psychological stress, but the evidence showed that the act had been premeditated, and the intensity of the confession did not provide a solid basis for a lighter defense. As the trial progressed, the city of Birmingham became a place of collective reflection and mourning. Schools, institutions, and community organizations held vigils and ceremonies to honor Emily's memory. The community came together to support the teacher's family and to process the collective trauma caused by the crime. The pain of loss was constant, but it also brought a unifying force to the city, showing resilience and the ability to come together in times of crisis. On October 5, 2023, Ryan Mitchell was convicted of first-degree murder. The sentence brought a sense of justice to many, but it also left an irreparable void in the lives of those who loved Emily. Ryan was sentenced to a long prison sentence, and the impact of his crime served as a grim reminder of the emotional and psychological complexities that can lead to such tragedies. With the conclusion of the case, the city of Birmingham began to rebuild. The pain of losing Emily was still palpable, but the community was determined to move forward. The tragedy brought to light discussions about mental health, emotional support, and the importance of being attentive to the needs of others. Emily Carter's story and the case surrounding her have become a catalyst for change and awareness in the city and beyond. Emily Carter's memory continued to be honored through funds and programs dedicated to education and psychological support. The city of Birmingham has not forgotten the impact she had on their lives, and the hope was that her loss would not be in vain. The case that began with a fateful encounter and ended with a devastating confession also brought to light the importance of facing and understanding the complexities of the human mind. Although Emily Carter's case reached its legal conclusion, the emotional and social impact continued to resonate. The city learned to deal with pain and tragedy in new and meaningful ways, and Emily Carter's legacy continued to live on through the changes and community support she inspired.